If you're a hockey player who finds they set a lot of big goals, but you struggle to be able to actually follow through with them. Maybe you struggle with motivation, maybe you struggle with self-belief or confidence. In this video, I want to break down in depth what you can do to actually set goals and then accomplish those goals effectively. So I recently got off a call with a 14-year-old hockey player. He was trying to make a move up to U18 in the next couple years. And something really stood out to me in that conversation. He was really struggling with motivation and staying consistently confident. And you might be struggling with something similar, or you may notice that something similar comes up for you too. And basically what he said is, some days I have the motivation and the drive to work hard, and then some days I just don't. Like, I don't feel like I want to do it. I don't have that drive to push forward and push myself. So ultimately, he was just struggling with being able to actually stay consistent and stay motivated through the hard times. And this is obviously going to lead to you not being confident, because you're not doing the work required to be good enough to also have confidence. So then we talked for another few minutes and dug into this, and I really discovered a lot of stuff that I think is going to help you a ton. He basically said that there's not a lot of hockey players who make it to the NHL where I'm from, so I don't really think it's realistic for me to want to even play pro hockey. And this hit me really hard when he said it. And the reason why is because I know the feeling of having that kind of thought in my head, but then every player I talk to who has a similar situation where they're struggling with motivation, struggling with confidence or self-belief, they usually have a pretty similar story. Now, what I could have done is hit them with the same kind of normal response that pretty much any mental coach would typically give them, which is just believe, you can do it, anything is possible, and kind of that rainbow sunshine type of mentality. And I'm not saying like having a positive mindset is a negative thing, but just hitting somebody with positivity when they're struggling to really figure out why they don't have a belief in themselves, why they're not confident, it's not going to help them. It's going to do is make them dislike you and push further away. And so if you're a player, or you have a parent who's doing this to you, or if you're a parent listening to this, I want you to really pay attention to if you're just saying what you think is the right thing, as opposed to saying what's right in that situation. Because sometimes you can say something that is the right actual thing that will help the person, like believing in yourself, staying positive, anything is possible. That stuff is probably the right thing to say as a base statement, but it's not going to help that individual player in that moment, in that context. And so you have to be able to pull yourself out and really realize that that's not what to do in that situation. So what I could see with this player is that he had built up very, very negative self-belief software. And when I say self-belief software, what I mean is that the actual wiring in his brain, he had begun to believe that the world worked a certain way, that things were a certain way, that he was a certain way. And so when your belief software sucks and you don't actually think what you want to accomplish is possible, and this can happen on a subconscious level, then it's very hard to push yourself and actually do the things you need to do. And it's pretty understandably frustrating. And it's even more frustrating for players when a coach or somebody comes to them or comments behind their back that they just don't want it enough. They just don't have that drive. And I sometimes find myself making that excuse for a player too and saying, oh, it's just because they don't want it. But a lot of times it's because the belief software that's been programmed into them from the environment, from people, places, and things that have occurred in their life, well, this has got them thinking the way that they think right now. And so it's tough to fully say it's that player's fault. And instead you want to say, well, they are a product of what they were raised around and the environment, and being able to help them alter that software is what's going to actually help them make a shift. And so that's why it becomes important to talk about beliefs versus desires. Every hockey player has desires. They want to score more goals. They want to get more points. They want to move up levels. They want to have more success. They want to have more fame. We all want stuff. We all have desires. And we all have some sort of belief about the way the world works. So for example, let's say when it comes to working out, so you may have built this belief for yourself that if you work hard, you follow a good program, you listen to a good trainer, that working out can make a huge difference and really separate you from the pack or help you maximize your physical performance. And this was developed through actually having done that and experiencing it, or listening to other people say how it worked, or watching other people do it and watching it work. And so if you were raised around somebody who was an elite player and they did this stuff and had success, well, then you can say, well, I believe that works, and you have that proof that solidifies into your mental software. But then you get the other side of the equation, where you have a player who doesn't believe in working out. They believe it's negative, it's going to lead to injuries, it's going to make them slow and blocky. And the NBA and basketball as a whole used to be like this for many years. It wasn't until around Michael Jordan's kind of early stages of his career, maybe mid area, there's actually a point when he talks about this working with Tim Grover, where he realized you can build muscle and still be a highly finesse and skilled player. You just have to do them simultaneously. And so that's the thing, is that was a piece of belief software that all of the best basketball players in the world believed. And yet that caught on, and that maintained as the core belief and existed as software in every player's head, essentially. And it took somebody like Michael Jordan and some other elite players to start to do the training and to prove it wrong. But players who start to believe that training doesn't work for hockey players, I think that it's really just a negative belief pattern. I think lifting correctly, learning how to actually build strength, build durability is going to help every player. It's just making sure you follow a program that can work for you. And now I'm not trying to pitch you on following a workout program, but what I'm trying to help you understand is that how you believe the world works and what you believe about something is going to alter the way you treat it and the way you act around it. And here's the thing, you're not born with beliefs. You're taught what the world is. Sometimes it's through just general experiences. Sometimes it's through things you've been told, through actual people around you. Sometimes it's social media or books or teachers or friends or family. And it makes sense if you think about this from an evolutionary perspective that we develop beliefs based on if we have a bad experience. So let's say, you go to a water hole, for example, and you go to pick up water out of the pond or whatever it is, and an alligator jumps out at you and tries to bite you. Well, it would be good to form a really quick belief around that situation that probably not a good idea to go back to that pond. And even if you've been there a bunch of times, it's good for your brain to automatically associate that as dangerous so that you don't go back to it. And for the people who didn't have that type of mental software that created beliefs very quickly, they probably did go back to dangerous places. They probably did get attacked. So being positive wasn't necessarily a good thing if you think about it logically. And so this is the theory of why people have a negativity bias, is because of that. And so you want to start to consider that for yourself, that are you just looking at things negatively because you were experienced it and that's the way the world is? Or is it just because you had a couple experiences and that convinced you that that's the way the world is? There's a little bit of a nuance there, and it's important to think about. And so it's really important to realize that we develop beliefs, and we developed beliefs evolutionarily because it's helpful for us. The world is complex. There's a lot of stuff going on. Hockey is complex. There's a lot of stuff going on. So instead of going into every situation and trying to basically be completely objective and have no former judgments or beliefs or biases, the brain finds it efficient to come up with beliefs and create principles that it believes are true. And this was super important when it was a life or death situation and you had to make a choice very quickly. Like I said with the alligator jumping out of the water example, it's very beneficial to be more negatively oriented when it's fight or flight or life or death, because if you do predict on the more positive side and you're wrong, well, you only have to be wrong once in that scenario, where you're better off to be guessing that it's a negative and staying safer in that scenario. And so for you as a hockey player, there's a bunch of different ways that your beliefs can be formed. And there's a bunch of situations you can have been in that have ruined the way you see hockey. And I'll show the counterexample, the more kind of positive programming version of it, just to show a contrast if you're in the negative. So maybe you're stuck in a hockey association, and like a bigger association, smaller association, where people are really negative and they don't look at you as somebody who has the potential to be a great player. Now think about that from the opposite perspective. You're in an association that does give you the belief that you could be great and puts a lot of emphasis into you, says, you know what, if you work on your skills, you can do this, and they push you and give you every opportunity possible. Or maybe you're on a team that everybody on that team, whether it's the coach or the teammates, maybe parents on that team, are constantly reinforcing this negative loop in your head of you can't play at this level, you shouldn't be on the ice, you shouldn't be there in big situations. That's going to start to slowly seep into your subconscious program. And think about that from the other perspective. If everybody's building you up on the team, if the coach believes in you, puts you in big pressure situations, parents on the team, teammates on the team are telling you, you know what, you really are a great player, you got a ton of skill, you have the opportunity to go somewhere. Well, that's going to reinforce that going. You're going to reinforce that action in your head to keep pushing yourself. And it's really important to realize that happens for players. The same player can be placed in two different teams or organizations and have a completely different experience, even though they're the same player to start with. And I know this experience because I was in an organization that didn't really treat me very positively, and actually didn't treat a lot of players very positively, and really ruined a lot of hockey careers. A lot of great players that had the potential to be elite because they were elite in terms of provincially at a young age, but because of the way they were treated, the mindset, the mentality, the development that they were put, or development place they were put in, held them back. And so it's really, really important to ask yourself, if you're in that scenario, is that changing the way you see the world? Because if it is, when you do get out of that situation, like I almost did, and unfortunately with the regions and the restrictions, I wasn't able to, but I would have went on a team where I would have been treated as a top line player with a ton of respect. And then you go back to that other scenario and it just says, oh, you're not good enough, you're a third liner, you shouldn't really be here, and you keep getting that programming. So it's very hard. You have to fight that, and it takes a lot of effort to fight that. Or maybe as a player, you have a parent who's really been hard on you or negative or gets angry when you don't play well and has taught you to see the negatives. They're always pointing out the flaws in your game. They're always saying this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And a lot of times if you have a really caring and concerned parent, they can make this mistake of being hypercritical. And I'm not saying as a parent you want to be hyper positive and just build your player up all the time, but it's important to realize if you've always been told that you aren't good enough or that you could be better, it's going to teach you to see things from a negative perspective. And we're already wired to be not positive, so you can see how this can start to create problems. So it's really important to realize what your beliefs are and how they're impacting your actions, because what you believe is true about the world is going to lead to how you act in the world. This is a non-negotiable thing. And if you still don't believe me that beliefs actually matter and do make a difference, let me highlight something that will completely change your perspective on this if you don't already know about it. So if you didn't know, early in the 1950s approximately, and obviously before that, the 4-minute mile was this concept of, it was basically unbreakable. People didn't think it could be done, and it was a belief that that was like the barrier that no one could really cross. Then on May 6th, 1954, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. So he ran it in 3 minutes and 59 seconds. So he ran it like just under. And now you would think after he breaks this, he breaks the record, he sets this new like thing out in the world that no one else has done for all of history up until this point. You'd think it would probably take many years to get there because it took decades or all of human history and no one had done it. So you'd think, okay, this is going to take a while. Then just 46 days later, it was broken again. So somebody did less than 4 minutes and actually beat Bannister's record. They ran it in 3 minutes and 57 seconds. So they actually not only ran the sub 4 minute, but they even beat it by a few seconds. And then in the following 3 years, 15 more runners managed to break this record. And what I mean by break the record is they ran sub 4 minute miles. And that's insane because no one had done it. And then all of a sudden in 3 years, I guess technically 17 people, I think is the number, broke it. And it doesn't even matter the specifics. It's just realizing, think about all of a sudden the belief shifts and then everybody starts operating differently. And that happened in the world. This is not a made up thing. So as people started believing they could do it, so they started thinking differently, they started really feeling differently, and then actions started to change. Maybe they started training a little differently, pushing themselves a little harder, probably trying to push the barrier of how long they could maintain a certain speed for. And then suddenly they start breaking it. all because someone proved it was possible. But if someone had believed it was possible before, and they probably could have done it 100 years before that, because humans have not changed that much in that time, if any. So beliefs lead to emotions, how you feel about something, and how you think about it. Those two things essentially kind of bounce back and forth. It leads to the actions you take, and then the actions you take lead to the results you get. And when I say actions, that basically means the preparation and then the actual performance action. And both of those things, you have to prepare to perform, and then you have to actually show up and perform. And those are going to lead to the results you get. It's that simple. And it doesn't mean it's easy, but it does break down to that when you really get down into the details of what it takes to actually shift a belief and how that affects the results you get. And so that's what's crazy is I really didn't realize until I really dug into this research how impactful beliefs are on the results people get. How mindset software can actually change the way you perform directly. And what people don't realize is that the beliefs you have are formed by the environment around you to start, and then you have to consciously choose to make a shift in your programming. So now what I'm going to do is break down how I would approach changing your mental software so that you can build the beliefs you want, set the goals you actually want to set that are high and what you want them to be, and then how you can actually set out an action plan to actually get there. So this is the important part, is that most people make the mistake of they set high beliefs, but then their plan sucks, or they set out a plan, but their beliefs suck. And either way, if the beliefs aren't there, then you're not going to do the action plan. And if your beliefs are there, but you don't have an action plan, well, then odds are you're going to start to fail and the beliefs are going to waver again. And so here's step one. First thing you want to do is you need to set a clear vision for what you actually want to get in your hockey career. What does the lifestyle look like? What does it look like to get to where you want to go? How would you feel when you were there? How would you think? How would you act? What would your day-to-day be like? What are the results you actually want to generate? The trophies you want to win? Get clear on all that stuff and really, really think about what is possible. Because until you even start thinking about what's possible, it's very hard to actually get there. So really let yourself dream in this part of the phases and give yourself that space to write it down, to visualize it, to actually create that. And then you can start to move on to number 2, which is your anti-vision. So now that you know what you want, what I also want you to do is write down what you don't want. Get very clear on what you do not want to happen. You want to be crystal clear on what is the lifestyle you don't want, what is the body you don't want, what is the personal situations and types of things that happen in your life. How do you not want to feel? How do you not want to think? How do you not want to act? So when you get clear on that, then you have something you are pushing towards or moving towards and something you're moving away from. This is going to create much more clarity and help you guide your compass when it comes to choosing what actions to take. And there's actually a rat study that was very, very interesting about this, which I'll highlight really quickly. And so what they did is scientists in a study, I'm not going to go into the depth of where it's from because I know you don't really care, but in this study, what they did is they took a rat, or took multiple rats, and they put them in this, basically, it's essentially what I understand is like a tube, but either way, regardless if it's a tube or a room, it makes no difference. The results are what matter here. So they put the rat down, and on one end, they basically tied its tail to a spring, and that spring could measure how hard it pulled. And so when the rat tried to pull forward, its tail would obviously be stuck on the spring, and it would show them how motivated essentially that rat was to move forward. So if the rat pulled really hard, you'd assume the rat was really motivated to move forward towards whatever it was trying to move towards, or move away in this case. But what they did is they put a piece of cheese in front, and then they measured, and they realized that, okay, it pulls like pretty hard. And keep in mind, they starved the rats, which is not the nicest thing in the world, but the rat was really hungry and it needed food to survive. So they put the cheese in front of it, and the rat pulls, and they measure it. Then what they did is they put the smell of a cat behind it, so something it was scared of. They put it in front of, or put it behind it, and then they see how hard the rat pulls. The rat pulls harder. So it was even harder than the cheese example. So it was pulling harder to get away from something it didn't want to lose than to get to something that was going to keep it alive. So it's like running away from something clearly does have something to it. And then The third one is that they put the cheese in front of it and they put the smell of the cat behind it, and it pulled the hardest. And so what the takeaway from this was, and this is actually a study I heard from Dr. Andrew Huberman on his podcast with another researcher about mindset. And basically what they realized is that if we draw this conclusion out for humans, humans essentially need something to run towards, but they also need something to be moving or running away from if you want to get the most out of yourself. You don't have to do this, obviously. I'm not saying any of this stuff is required, but if we're talking about optimizing our mental game, this is going to be the most effective thing to think about, is what is going to allow you to move towards what you want and away from what you don't want. So that's why you need to have an anti-vision. Now, the third thing here is, now that you know what you want and what you don't want, what are you willing to actually do? What are you willing to sacrifice and give up in order to get what you want? Now, a lot of players don't like to think about this. I didn't like to think about this. I don't like to think about this now. But you have to decide, what is it that you're willing to give up in order to get what you want? Because if you want something that's really important, there are things you're going to have to give up. Whether it's maybe you don't watch as much TV, you don't scroll on Instagram or TikTok as much, you don't watch as much YouTube, maybe you don't go out with friends as much, maybe you don't go and party much, maybe you don't drink, maybe you don't spend as much time with family, or whatever it is. But you have to make a decision of, if something is going to be required, if I have to do more, am I willing to make the sacrifices that might be required? And so I'm not telling you you just have to give up everything in your life now suddenly because you want to be successful in hockey or anything, but you have to make a decision, how much are you willing to give up? And then be okay with if you don't get the result because you weren't willing to give up what was required. It's pretty simple. And a lot of times we just don't realize that we're not willing to move away. We're not willing to give up certain things that we really like. We're not willing to eat healthy. We're not willing to be hungry. We're not willing to be tired or uncomfortable. But sometimes that's what's required. Maybe you have to go and play with really good players this summer and get embarrassed and just get destroyed, look weak in the gym. But in 2-3 years from now, maybe that's what's going to push you to get to where you need to go, to do the work. See how that's a sacrifice you have to make, which might just be embarrassment. So make sure you get clear on what you're willing to give up. Write that stuff down. And then based on that, if you're not willing to give up certain things, then change your vision. Change what you're willing to actually believe you can get, because you're not going to get exactly what you want if you're not willing to give up anything at all. And you want to waste all your time doing ineffective things. You want to stay up all night, not sleep, not eat well, not train, and then just expect you're going to get everything you want. Maybe you will, but I'm going to guess no, because McDavid is a great example of this. People don't realize he trained with skills coaches, skating coaches, personal trainers ever since he was super young. And that's because he wanted it and his parents supported it. Now, if you're a player whose parents support it, you have to be willing to do what's required and put in the effort to make it happen. So if you have the opportunities, are you willing to make the sacrifices? Are you willing to do what it takes to make it happen? You have to ask yourself that. Now, the next thing is get clear on where you are. So step 4 is get clear on where you currently are. My recommendation is go to a skills coach, so somebody you trust with that. Go to a fitness coach or a personal trainer, a strength and conditioning coach. Go to a mental coach. Go to a hockey IQ and film coach. You want to go to these people and have them look at each component of your game and tell you what's missing, what's lacking, and get clear on exactly where you are in terms of what you don't have, what you do have, strengths, weaknesses, everything in between. If you can't do that, then I recommend you go and record all your skating, go back and look at all your film from the last couple seasons, go in depth, measure your training, your lifting stuff, and figure it all out. Figure out exactly where you are. Because now you know where you are, you know what you want, you know what you don't want, you know what you're willing to give up. Now you know, okay, here's where I currently sit. Here's starting point from right now. And then number 5, now what we want to do is start to set micro goals that are small checkpoints in between where you currently are and where you want to go. So your vision. And what will help with this is to break it down into weekly. So you can even do daily, weekly, monthly. You can do every 3 months. Then about every season, so like season and then off season. And then I would do 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And start to think about, well, what are the things I want to hit over those times? Get clear on what are the goals that are going to get me there if I set these checkpoints. And realize that if you set these long-term plans, but then don't have these checkpoints, you're going to be mad because you're not accomplishing what you want. But if instead you have micro goals that you hit and you feel that dopamine hit, you're going to be driven to push forward, push forward, push forward. And so there's something about lifting that is really cool with this, where the West Side methodology, if you haven't read about Louis Simmons, I recommend it. His methodology was that if you trained with him for 10 years and stuck with it consistently and really pushed through the hard times, and you did the program like to a T, you could gain about 5 pounds in every core lift. So for powerlifting, it's squat, bench, and deadlift. You could gain about 5 pounds per month for 10 plus years. And so if you do the math on that, let's say, for example, you just do the simple math, you start at 0 and you spend 10 years, well, 5 pounds per month and then times that by 12 is going to be 60, and then times that by 10, so 60 pounds per year times 10 is 600 pounds. So imagine like how few people can lift 600 pounds in any lift. And then think about if you did 10 straight years starting at 0 and just gained 5 pounds per month over the course of 10 years, that's where you'd get. And it sounds absolutely ridiculous to think about, but if you do figure out the programming and the methodologies and you don't get hurt, you stay healthy, like why can't you do that? And that's what I'm starting to think about now is like, man, I wish I had have actually set myself up with the best possible training and all that stuff, because it would have made a huge difference for me now if I had from the time I was 15 to 25 to progressively and incrementally build. And even if I did half that, even if I gained 300 pounds on every lift and got that much stronger, just think about like what that could do for your ability. And you apply that to the mind, body, skill, and there's just so much that's possible. I just think it's really cool to think about. And so that's why you set those micro goals, because you get those hits of I'm winning, and it's going to push you to keep going. Then number 6 is get clear on your environment. So we talked about environment. We talked about the impact a negative environment has on your career. And so I really highly recommend you take a step back, you peel the layers back, and you ask yourself, what about my environment is not good? What about my environment could be holding me back? And then remove the things that need to be removed. Friends, if it's family that's holding you back, if it's like whatever person in your life, if it's the things in your environment that you can't get away from specifically, maybe you need to just take a step back and say, well, maybe I have to move. Maybe I have to go to a different location that gives you more opportunity. Like that can be a reality. And I didn't do that when I needed to, when I was younger in my junior career. And I know how stupid that was. Like, make the investment, go and train with better players, go to different teams or leagues. If you're scared to go invest a couple $1,000s to go try out for USHL or NAHL teams, just do it. Who cares? In the long run, if you lose $2,000, you don't make those teams, at least you'll know you tried. So try and do what you can, because you may have the pride of not wanting to waste money, but the disappointment of not taking those risks will be much higher. I'm telling you that. I hear that from everybody, and I know it myself. So highly recommend that. And so change your environment when you need to change it. Get clear on what you need in your environment to get you to where you want to go. Because if what you're doing in your current environment, or what the environment is giving you, is not pushing you towards where you want to go, then you need to go find a place that will. Then number 7, change the beliefs you need to change about yourself. And what I mean by this is you have to get clear on what is the problem with you. Is it beliefs? Is it the way you think? Is it the way you feel? Is it your physical body? Lay out all the layers and all the different details of your game and whatever is stopping you. And then go and learn the information you need to learn. Go and do the work you need to do to improve on those things. And because you have a long-term plan that you should have already laid out, it's typically just going to be that you need to step back and ask yourself, what are the mental software components, the beliefs, the emotions, and the thoughts that aren't going to get me to where I want to go? What do I need to change? And then do the work to change. That's why the base of our programs in the identity mastery system and maximize system and all the different things we do, it's all designed around dealing with the part of you that's going to hold you back once you have all these things in place. So you get everything in place, you change your mind at the same time, or change your mind first, then put those things in place. It'll make a huge difference. And the final thing here that you're going to want to do, well, this is actually step 8, there's a few more, is you want to lay out a clear plan. And what I mean by laying out a clear plan is that you want to actually establish all the details, like I said, about every component and lay that all out and then learn the necessary things, if you don't know them, to actually set up the plans. Number 9, create accountability. So if you didn't realize when you were young, you probably didn't want to brush your teeth, for example. And what you did is you had your parents who said, brush your teeth. And if you didn't want to do it, they said, do it. And they kept you accountable. And then suddenly you got to a point where you just do it. And then there's other factors that are going to reinforce it, but accountability works. It gets you to do the things you need to do. And so build accountability and incentives into your life. And when I say accountability, I mean have things or people that keep you accountable, that if you don't do it, you're going to have some kind of like punishment, essentially. And incentives are rewards and things you're going to get. So if you are in a group and then you say, hey guys, I did my training this week, I crushed it, and people are like, awesome, man, that's great. That's an incentive because you're excited about that. But if you miss it and then people check in and say, hey, why didn't you do the thing you said you were going to do? Well, that's keeping you accountable. Now you're going to do it next time. Then number 10 is use all this stuff to build a confidence memory bank. So every time you do a training session, note it down. Build up a huge bank of all the things you've done to be better, all the accomplishments you've had. Build a highlight reel of your training. Build a highlight reel of your actual in-game results. Build it all out. Get clear on all of the stuff that you've done. And this is going to give you a memory bank of confidence and stuff to believe in, stuff that's going to tell you how good you can actually be. And then when you have doubt, when you have hard times, it's going to teach you, you can do this because you've done this before, or you have the evidence to say you can do this. And then number 11, and this may be the most important thing on your hockey journey, even though it's the final one, is you have to protect your beliefs. Everybody's going to have their own opinions on your hockey career. They're going to tell you the way things are. They're going to tell you this is right, this is wrong, this is how you should do it. But you have to protect your beliefs. If you want to get to a long-term place in hockey or anything in life, you have to protect the beliefs, because other people are going to try to change your beliefs, and you have to step up and be willing to say, I'm going to protect what I believe in here. I'm not saying like be dogmatic in the sense of never consider other people's opinions, but you have to believe in the long-term vision and not let people break that. Because I know what it feels like to have it broken, and it changes the way you act. You let yourself party a little more, you let yourself slack a little more, and it just seeps into your life. And so it's really easy to have that happen, and you'll notice it happen where you start slacking, and it's typically because the belief starts to waver. And so protect them. Treat your beliefs like basically like a plant in a garden. Treat other negative beliefs that try to come in as like weeds. And you have to notice when they get planted and be able to pull them out. And that's what our identity systems are all about. That's what all our programs are about, is helping you unwire those things, giving you methods, giving you philosophies and approaches to deal with that stuff. And so you got to protect them. You got to keep that garden growing, watering it consistently, and it'll make a huge difference for you. Now, I'm losing my voice here at the end of this one. I really, really enjoyed this. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. Please share this if you haven't already. Give me a rating on whatever it is or like it. Give me a comment. Anything that helps push this so more people can see it just really helps me out. So I appreciate it, and it shows me to keep doing more stuff like this. And if you don't like it, let me know, and I'll see what I can do to improve it. I'll talk to you guys soon. Hope you have a great week.